Hi, I'm Joe Lenton and welcome to Original Art Photography. Today we're going to be looking at editing an image using Lightroom. This is a sunset at the Norfolk coast at Cromer Pier. This was taken as a demo shot during a workshop, and in fact you can see somebody over here in the shadows with their tripod up as well. And what I decided I would do today with you is just show you some of the various steps that I use when editing images like this, just so that you can see how I go about getting the final images from that which I start out with from the camera. So this is a raw file. Of course, you should always shoot raw files for these kind of things so that you've got as much data to play with as possible to edit your image. So we're in Lightroom in the Develop module. And the first thing that I'm going to do with this is to straighten up the pier a bit, because you can see the effect of the wide angle lens there has distorted that a little bit. Now, for these kind of things you can sometimes try the automatic version, so you can try the full correct. Yeah, didn't really do an awful lot, or the auto. Again, not particularly brilliant there. So manually, I drag that to correct the verticals. That's a bit better. Now what I'll do is crop the image accordingly. One of my favourites for landscape crops is a 2x1, which is sort of this letterbox type shape. So I just want to lose most of that left-hand side up to about there, and bring it in so it's just inside on the right-hand side like that. Okay, that'll do for now. Gives us something to work with. So I've got rid of those awkward bits on the left there, just to save myself any bother of cloning them out or whatever. So we've got our basic sort of Seascape starting image here. What I would tend to do to begin with is even out the exposure a bit, bring the highlights down and the shadows up a bit, add a little bit of clarity in and see how that's looking. To bring some of the blacks up just a touch as well. Okay, now the color temperature here is not all that interesting. Even when you start bringing up the saturation, even if you go really over the top, it's not the best set of colors there. So you can cheat a little bit using white balance and other things. So one thing that you can try is use the white balance dropper on the actual foam of the sea, and that sometimes gives you a slightly more interesting look to it. Here it hasn't really changed it very much at all, so manually I may bring that up to make it slightly warmer, just to exaggerate the effect a little bit, and possibly a little bit also on the magenta. Obviously you don't want to turn it bright pink, but a little bit of extra colour on there, and it just looks warmer, looks a little bit more inviting that way. You can add a little bit more into that. So in the highlights of the split toning here, if you leave that around the reddy orangey colours and you pull the saturation up, see, you can very quickly overdo it if you take it too far, but just a tiny little bit and you can start to bring in a little bit more colour. So there you go. That's, you can see the difference there between the two. That's without, and that's with that little bit of colour added in. If you don't like doing that, then don't do it. Simple as that, really. I quite like the effect, so I do tend to use that. Now, with the sky, this area here is clearly a bit too bright at the moment, and we could bring out a lot more detail in the clouds. So first start is with a graduated filter. Bring the exposure down a bit, a little bit more contrast. We can drag that through the sky like so, like that. Yeah, that's not too bad. Bring it just below that really bright bit so it gets all of that. You can of course play with each of the other sliders. If you want to bring the highlights just down a little bit more, then you can do. If you want to bring a little bit more clarity into it, just to make the definition in the clouds a little bit clearer, and by all means go for it on that as well. So yeah, it's a more dramatic sky already, beginning to look a little bit more interesting. If I wanted to just do a little bit more on that top bit of the sky there, then I could layer another graduated filter over that. I wouldn't want to drop the exposure anymore, but I may want to pop the clarity up just a touch. and bring that down maybe a little bit, if tiny spot of dehaze if you wanted to bring back a little bit of the dark blue in the sky there, but in that particular instance I think I probably would just prefer the contrast to give a little bit of slight darkening around the edges. Okay, yeah, so you don't have to use just one graduated filter. You can stack a few of them up if that's what you want to do to create a particular effect. Now what I'm going to do is just brighten the whole image up a little bit. You can see from the histogram up here we've got a little bit of space before we hit the right hand side, so I'm just going to brighten it up a bit so that I can then darken areas selectively, because if I start doing that from where it was before they'd just get too dark really. As you can see, that bit there has come up very bright again. You can brush a little bit of darkening in there if you want, or you can try the luminance sliders over here and just say, oh yeah, there's a little bit of that yellow, and well, maybe not really on the orange, but you can take that down just a little bit that way, just to keep that from looking too white. Right, now what I'm going to do is grab a radial filter, double click on effect to neutralize that, bring the exposure down a little bit, not too far, possibly up a little on the contrast. Now we're going to drag this over the brighter part of the image, which is of course this left hand side over here. So the area it's affecting is to the right over here. Okay, so the brightest bit is clearly there where the sun is. So pop that in, and that's given us a little bit of a darkening effect on the right hand side there. Now if we wanted to draw the attention even more to this area here, we can repeat that process, something along these lines, so you put it again at the brightest part of the image like that. I think I'll take that extra contrast out, and you can just drop the overall exposure down a tiny bit, maybe not quite as much as before. And there we go, we've got that brighter bit where the sun is, and then everything else as it sort of tails off towards the right hand side there gets that little bit darker. If you wanted to increase the contrast a little bit here between the cloud and the bright part of the sun there, if you use the adjustment brush, pop a little bit of negative exposure in there to darken it, and then brush into the cloud here. You see, that way gives us a little bit more of a sense that this side of the cloud is darker because we've got the bright sun behind it and it's sort of thick cloud. Those sorts of things are optional. It's a bit like sort of dodging and burning type of idea, selectively lightening and darkening particular areas of the image. Similarly here, if you wanted that the sea, the foam to stand out on that a bit more, you could brush a bit more contrast or clarity, something like that, in there. So just have a quick look again at the colours that we've got in here. I don't know whether I'd really want to increase the vibrance on that at the moment. Probably not. No. Okay, I think that's got enough colour and that in as it is. It'll just take it too far if we push that any more than that from there, I think. So that gives us an interesting image that we can then do further things to. You can look at removing things like this vapor trail in the sky up here. Sometimes you can do this in Lightroom using the healing brush, but often that sort of stuff is best done in Photoshop. Let's just have a quick try and see whether it does a reasonable job on this. So you just brush over the area you want to get rid of and see what it samples and does instead. How does that look? Yeah, that's not actually that bad. Will do for the sake of this. Now, I would, as I say, normally do that sort of thing in Photoshop because it's more precise, it's more powerful for that kind of thing than Lightroom. But there we go. Less distracting over there now that vapor trail is gone. That just improves the image there a little bit. So, last sort of thing that you would probably want to then be doing in Lightroom would be go to the detail section and have a close look at an area here. Let's put that on that writing, just with a bit of the sky. Now you can see there's it's a little bit grainy there, and that writing's not perfectly clear. If I drag the sharpness up a bit so we get the writing a little bit sharper, you'll see that and then sharpens some bits you don't want. So hold down Alt or Option and drag the masking slider across to stop it from sharpening the sky and just doing the details that you're after. So a few of the edges of the clouds, like so, that grit from there is now gone. Few little speckles, perhaps you can just hold it back with a very small amount of noise reduction, and then that just smooths that over. So if I click that off, you'll see what it was like beforehand, just like that, and now click it on again. You can see it's just made that writing clearer, made a little bit more sharp on that image overall. So that's what we've got with just a few minutes quickly playing around with it. You could do a better job and play more carefully and add a few extra steps in there if you wanted to do so, but you can see fairly quickly you can get an image to something a lot more interesting than the original raw file that came in. So that's what we started off with, which has, you know, that potential for the interesting sky and sort of reflection in the water and that, but it's not all that interesting. It needs a little bit of tweaking, and there you can see the version that we've done, which is playing around a little bit with a few adjustments. Again, that might not be subtle enough for some people, or it might be too subtle for others. Just adjust things according to your own tastes and enjoy what you produce. That's the main thing. So hopefully this will give you a few ideas as to how you might want to go about editing your own Seascape photos. So I'm Joe Lenton, and this is Original Art Photography. Thank you for watching.